Hey y'all. Sorry the end of the last video got cut off. Phone storage, wouldn't you know it, cut out on me. So we ended by talking about self-actualization, how Abraham Maslow, who formulated the hierarchy of needs of human motivations, he sort of posited that self-actualization is the pinnacle of human existence, right? This is particularly prevalent in the West. However, this thing that is supposed to be the sort of the top of the pyramid for us, this maximal state that we could be in, he was really surprised when he got to this Blackfoot Nation tribe and found that this thing that we all sort of ascribe to and is sort of hard to find within Western societies was actually found in quite abundance within this indigenous tribe. Despite all the suffering of their ancestors, these people were still finding some way to harmoniously live with one another and with nature, which we'll get to in like just a second. But ultimately, this converged Maslow towards an extended hierarchy of needs, where instead of self-actualization at the top, he put a truncated version of what he learned with this indigenous tribe and just simply called it self-transcendence, going beyond the self. Now, this encapsulated a couple key concepts that he picked up from the Native Americans. And so the first one is community actualization. This is one step above self-actualization. Essentially, imagine self-actualization as a single helix, like Helix by Flume, like the cover of Skin and Helix by Flume, which is sort of the rise of a single helix, right? Imagine self-actualization as your personal spiral path through existence. What community actualization shows us is that your self-actualization and my self-actualization are actually better together. They actually form a virtuous cycle. They self-compound of their own volition, of their own, their velocities accelerate one another, right? So a double helix is stronger than a single helix, and community actualization simply posits that when you become of age, you start to contribute back to the tribe that has nurtured you as a whole being since birth. Instead of meeting your physiological needs first, you're born in this world whole. This ascribes to what we might define as a soul, which we covered a little bit in the last video. But you're born as this whole being. The tribe then nurtures you physiologically, so they just provide the very basic tenets of what you need, including food, water, shelter, etc., that kind of thing. And then they love and nurture you into this full being that you are, and then you start to community actualize when you get back, right? Because this tribe system that is centered around whole beings, naturally people want to give back to the people that they love, right? They are so close to these people that have raised them since birth, that have treated them with respect and dignity and empathy, and they are ready to participate in the community actualization program, the community purpose co-creation that will continue to perpetuate the thriving that they were able to experience to whatever extent their tribe was able to provide, right? So community actualization is a virtuous cycle of self-actualizations. And then finally, the peak of this First Nations perspective, and this is a term that I will very much use a lot for the rest of my life. They called it cultural perpetuity, and cultural perpetuity is composed of two things. The first thing that cultural perpetuity is composed of is that community actualization aspect, so living harmoniously with self and others. And the second part of the cultural perpetuity equation is living in harmony with nature. So the idea of cultural perpetuity is that if we live harmoniously with one another and we live harmoniously with nature, then our culture is going to continue to perpetuate. It's going to essentially live forever. Our way of living flows with the sine wave of time, we could say. This taps in just a tiny little spiel in that sine wave of time. Anytime you're talking about a wave function, they talk about it like particularly in regards to a Fourier transform, in regards to a cosine part and an I sine part. So cosine plus I sine is a wave function, and the reason that there's that imaginary component, that I sine, is to benchmark the phase shift of the current wave function relative to its more sort of pure counterpart. So there is, as we mentioned, with complex meta trauma, and I should probably make a whole video on just that at some point. I even have a whole document dedicated toward it already, research document. But just like complex meta trauma, waveforms are complex. They are real and imaginary. And this cultural perpetuity aspect we could also probably think of in terms of being complex, right? There is a very real component of living in a harmony with nature, and there's a very imaginary component of our shared purpose, our shared values, our value fluency that we got into in the last video. We are not only fluent with our values, but the values of the wider ecosystem, whether that be the humans or the nature that has always been here, about, between, within, and even beyond human beings, right? Nature is sort of our meta, we could say. So we are more powerful together. A notable a notable idea, I should say, from that spiritualized paper that I mentioned the last video, and that I just love to talk about for ages. It talks about, or there's somebody in there that talks about how the unit of self is not just I, it's you and I, right? So it's this yin and yang, it's this me, and then it's literally everybody else. And somehow those are sort of equivalent, they're equal and opposite, but ultimately part of one flow that we could call the people. So yes, community, actualization, and cultural perpetuity are very prominent frameworks to navigate our social mission to heal. I would even posit that combining this with metamodernism, which we have sort of alluded at least 2 videos ago, if not both of these past videos, blending the old and the new, the gravity and the levity, the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine. I mean, just combining opposites, finding what bigger truth they're both partially describing, and getting to the more paradoxical coexistences of mutually exclusive but comprehensively exhaustive forces that comprise, it would seem, a lot of facets of reality, including systems, including metaphysics and physics proportionalities, just in terms of a sort of duality in existence, which is directly mirrored by our two-sided McGill-Christian still going to use that word, McGill-Christian brain. So I mentioned internal family systems, I'm pretty sure, in the last video. Another approach to healing is sort of aligning with ourselves, and more generally speaking, just honoring the fact that we are inherently multi-dimensional beings. So I like to look at healing and health and sort of realize that they are one and the same. I got into this last video, but just to encapsulate, healing from something that is hurting you is the exact same as the health from chasing something that is better, right? They are sort of both vectors in the same direction, right? One is just a push force, I'm healing from something, versus a pull component of the vector, which is being healthy for something, right? We got into why pull is probably greater than push, I would posit. And we can be pulled in a variety of different directions. Now, this framework that I have on the right side is the 7 dimensions of wellness. There's another framework that's the 9 dimensions of wellness. They're all sort of aggregating around the same ideas. I just like the 9 because it includes cultural as well. Cultural health is a lot more important than I think we give credit for in the modern era. But what matters is that we are all capable of all of these. We are all adults that are not only responsible for taking care of our needs, but we also have the resources to do so. This taps into something called the abundance mindset, which would be another approach to healing, right? Realizing that my slice of the pie, quote unquote, whether we're talking economically, whether we're talking attention, whether we're talking purpose, recognition, power, whatever. As I keep trying to iterate, we're living in an infinite and eternally evolving, not just universe, but multiverse, right? So like the cosmos. We are in this infinite potential space that is embedded all the way, from the highest of highs, which is like all the way out, like, literally God knows how far into the cosmos. And then also in the lowest of lows, the smallest of smalls in this context. And we talked about how all of matter at the tiniest of levels is 99.99999, etc. percent empty space. So, reality is sort of a mystery, and with all this abundance of potentiality flowing, and even just resources, honestly, like if we go mine some meteors, there are some meteors that have billions and trillions or quadrillions, in almost incomprehensible amount of physical materials, and that's just scratching the surface of what we define as value in the current paradigm. That's 3D value, but I think that we need to move toward a more comprehensive, we'll say 4D value system, a time-based value system. Time is not just money. I will hammer this over and over and over again, but time is like the essence of existence itself. It's this multifaceted aether, this Tao Chi, we might say, that holds the fabric of reality together, right? It's almost an act of love. And we mentioned God is possibly the life or death balance, and how does that happen? Over time. So time, again, is very central to everything, and we could even interpret these 7 dimensions of wellness as different buckets of time that fulfills us as human beings. So we need to align ourselves with the full spectrum of our needs, and all of those have a push component, a scarcity component, and they all have a pull component and abundance component as well. It would seem that we also need to align with the universe. So I talked about this a good amount in my first YouTube video ever, which was my intro to recursive relativity, the first one ever. There's gonna have to be probably like a few different iterations, because it's very much a work in progress right now. I've been playing around a lot with ideas. I'm gonna need to map the data, but I think you'll find some compelling arguments in there. And what's cool is that me and ChatGPT were able to set up this directly proportional relationship, this mirror between these 12 universal laws and then 12 laws of physics. And it's kind of eerie how similar they are to one another. I would strongly conjecture at this point, and blow me up in the comments if you want, I would strongly conjecture that the forces that shape the physical universe are the same forces that affect the mental universe. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I'm batshit crazy, because honestly, we all need a reality check sometimes, so just let me know. But what these 12 universal laws seem to ascribe is that there are fundamental principles undergirding all of metaphysics, all of philosophy, and all of ontology, epistemology, right? So you get down into it, we'll just run through them super fast. So the law of divine oneness, everything is connected, everything is one. No matter how many yin and yangs you encounter, there always seems to be one flow, and that might be seen as linear time, which would actually make linear time the most powerful yet simple force to ever exist. Yet time also spirals and works in cycles. Again, we will talk about time very extensively at some point. So the law of divine oneness, that's number 1. Number 2, the law of vibration. Everything has a unique vibrational frequency. All of that matter that is empty space, the formation of it is governed by electromagnetism, which binds electrons to atomic nuclei, right? And something about that interaction, I think this is what's described in maybe like quantum electrodynamics or something, QED, but something in that relationship determines what state of matter the particles are in, and it's regulated by electromagnetism. So everything is vibrating because electromagnetism comes in this broad, these 7 broad brackets of frequencies that encompass like pretty much everything. It's a really broad bracket. So law of vibration just says that within that sort of upper bound maybe of gamma and that lower bound of either radio, or maybe we can go even further and say like gravitation, that's also a work in progress. But no matter what you're looking at, it is sort of vibrating. And if you really tune into your body, you will realize that you are vibrating as well. Recall that E equals MC squared applied to your body means that you are vastly more energy than matter. And if you can feel your energy, I guarantee that you will get a nice little yes, I said that. Anyways. Number 3, the universal law is the law of attraction. What is like unto itself is drawn. Like attracts like. I mentioned that in the first video in the trauma segment. The law of correspondence, as above, so below. This taps into one of my favorite and probably paradigm shifting ideas of all time, which is the idea of a fractal. That is a term in geometry and also in chaos theory to describe a pattern that no matter how far out you zoom, how big you look at it, or how far in you zoom, how small you look at it, that the pattern is the same recursion of a one fundamental principle, right? It's a shape that no matter how big or small you're looking at it is the same pattern. And so this, as above, so below just means that when you zoom up, you're seeing the same thing as you're seeing below. It's this idea that things are sort of like a spiral of themselves. There's a law of action, sometimes called the law of inspired action. Manifestation requires aligned action. It's not enough just to like pray and wait, your fate. You have to take active steps toward it as well, right? If you're wishing for financial prosperity, you can't just pray for like money to appear in your bank account, right? You need to create a GoFundMe. You need to craft, a super massive series of 1-hour videos that that take on one single presentation that is supposed to serve as like the pinnacle of your work. Like there's a lot of different options. And yes, I am plugging myself right now. But it's not enough to just, wait in the yin. You have to apply yang force as well. The 6th universal law is the law of cause and effect. Every action has a consequence. Newton famously said, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? And not just one, it's a ripple in the field. It's a recursive relationship, right? The effect has an effect on the cause, which then affects the effect back again. It keeps sort of bouncing back and forth, like an oscillator that just goes to 0, right? It just keeps, decreasing that bandwidth. And something that One Strange Rock encapsulates about, our atmosphere, and I mentioned that documentary on Disney Plus. Again, absolutely seminal work, so please watch it. But Chris Hadfield talks about the atmosphere like a guitar string. When you pluck a guitar string, it produces a unique frequency, but the thing about it is that, like we just said, it keeps oscillating in 0 and 0. But the thing about a guitar string is that you can never quite tell when the note ends, right? And that's exactly like our atmosphere. Just, at some point it starts to, it's a huge gradient, right? At some point it becomes more cosmos than like Earth's atmosphere, but like where that is can be a little difficult to define. So every action has a consequence and a reverberation, we'll say, in this sort of like collective field that we're in, and we don't exactly know when it begins or when it ends, only that they sort of feed each other over and over again. The law of compensation, you are rewarded for right action. This is just sort of a fundamental way of saying that like there might actually be a a fundamental, natural, moral, ethical order within the universe, the cosmos. And I mentioned right angles of electromagnetic angular momentum, and sometimes I have to wonder if light is right, and that means that light is truth, and that would certainly resonate with some different cosmologies, we'll say, different religions and different other spiritual teachings. So that is the law of compensation, number 7. Law of number 8, we have also mentioned in a past video, the law of perpetual transmutation of energy. Energy is always moving and always changing. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed, only reborn. The law of relativity, everything is relative to one's unique sort of vibrational frequency, one's unique world line, to use a physics term, which is sort of one's history, one's like historical pattern through the fabric of space-time, we'll say. It's almost like memory, right? And everything is relative to your memory. We'll get into at some point how some cultural lies may have manifested in an overpronounced forgetting function in a separate video. That's number 9. The law of 10 is the law of polarity. Now, we started this whole thing talking about the Tao, the yin and the yang, and this just further enacts that there are two sides to everything, right? There's a receptive component, and then there's a active component, an outward component. Number 11 is the law of rhythm. Nothing is permanent. Everything is moving. Everything is stacking in polyrhythmic progressive cycles, again, which are going to be the future of music. If I could put my name on a lottery ticket for this right now, I would, because I believe in this with all my heart. The law of rhythm. Nothing is permanent. Everything is sort of like synchronized. The constellations of above tend to have an eerie synchronicity, or an eerie resemblance, I should say, to the constellations of the mind. It almost makes you wonder if we evolved to be star beings, and we can unpack that can of worms literally any other time. Finally, number 12 is the law of gender, and this might be the most controversial, but let's just, think about it objectively. There's a balance of energies within everything, right? There's a male component, there's a female component. So, it goes into that active and receptive part. It also goes in that wholes and parts part. But just even more primordially, if you looked all throughout the animal kingdom, humans included, you'd see that nature naturally produces in sets of male and of female, right? Even in electronics, when we're talking about the thing that you plug into the outlet, right? The outlet would be like the female component, right? It receives the male component, which is like pronged out, right? It generates electricity and then finds safety in the sort of magnetic threshold. So we can align with the universe by simply just, I remember reading a LinkedIn article about this, and it's not about like going out and preaching these 12 universal laws so much as like letting them sort of undulate like in the back of your head. And the idea is that the more you just sort of like contemplate these things and meditate on these things, let them sit, let them be, let them breathe, the idea is that you are more likely to find that they explain many, many different parts of reality. Now, all of these we could sort of think of as manifestations of like wave functions. I talked about a backlog of human traumas, which is almost traumatizing in of itself to think about. It came from the same paper where at the end I broke down wave interference, right? And there are, if nature is a wave function and our lifetime is also a wave function, there are two ways these wave functions can interact. They can either constructively interfere, where the peaks synchronize and it produces like an even greater, I think that would be amplitude. This sort of like, we can even think of human power as just simply like amplifying the volume, the intensity, the loudness of existence. So we can either work harmoniously and amplify, the wavelengths of the rest of life, or we can destructively interfere. We might go all the way to the point where we are so counterbalanced to the way of nature, and we might even posit that we are sort of in this direction right now, just based off of like, you know, our relationship with the total, you know, Gaian biosphere. And I've already mentioned we're going to make another video on Gaia theory. But if we are already sort of living in opposition with nature, at what point do they completely cancel out? At what point are our ways of living so like unnatural and so disconnected from cultural perpetuity and, you know, literally everything else in between, that we extinguish our own inner fire, right? When does Prometheus have to cry for his lost endeavors of bringing fire to humanity? When does it get washed out in water? So aligning with the universe, very promising avenue for you know, social ways of healing, right? We are all capable of contemplating these things, and we're all capable of thinking about the amplitude, the effect that we're having on the total wave function of reality, the sine wave of time. So yes, like I mentioned, we are all extremely capable. We are all these multifaceted beings. We are all these unique nodes in a cosmic net of interconnectedness. I had this in a past slide, but Indra's net, that'll probably be something else that we cover in a later video. The basic idea is that there's this infinite net between the physical and the metaphysical, right? It's not either or, it's between. And this net is, or at the nodes of the net rather, are jewels. And if you peer into one jewel, then all the rest of the jewels sort of peer back at you, right? They are all entangled. And we are, you know, all unique nodes within this collective net because we are all in different space-times at any given point in time. I cannot be in the same space-time as you, and yet somehow there's this unified, you know, we have this subjective time, but also this objective time at the same time. And you think I'm crazy when I say it's all about time? I think you're starting to hear me a little bit, eh? So, but I mean, just look over the course of the human H story, what we have been able to, you know, accomplish. Look at how many people, you know, flock to Mecca, you know, every single year, maybe even well, maybe it is every year. I'm not quite sure how often they do these pilgrimages, but sufficient to say that there are en masse gatherings where humans gather harmoniously over something that, you know, an alien may or may not be able to prove that exists, but it certainly exists in the minds and hearts of these people, right? We are capable of coming together in spectacular ways. This is also mirrored in, you know, the festival scene. Huge fan of rave culture, peace, love, unity, respect. And, you know, people will gather in just like super massive quantities. And yes, I love using this word, but super massive quantities for these like technological innovations of both sound and then also, you know, you can see in this picture, there's like fireworks and just lighting sequences. This is sort of like, if we were to take a tribal, you know, celebration of the seasons, which might have been, you know, our ancient monuments, wonders of the world could have been used for, and we turned them into like a modern version, they would probably look something like a festival set. So a meta modern, you know, festival set might just be like a ritualized DJ set, a ritualized, an intentional use of music and advanced technology to amplify human consciousness. So we can also overcome adversity. I put a picture of somebody doing like wheelchair rock climbing, which is like so freaking niche, but also so cool. It also reminds me of the guy who like set records all around the world for just climbing these things, these rock faces freehand, and, you know, making up and down safely. And apparently he had like no concept of fear in his brain, which is like both like good and bad, right? But, you know, we are capable of overcoming great adversity, particularly in regards to trauma, intergenerational trauma. This all comes back to healing, right? You want to talk about human capacity? Let's talk about the internet for half a second. I might have to make some kind of video about this, But if we are talking about the collective mind of human existence, look no further than your local internet access. The internet is a strange and wonderful thing that connects us not only to each other in this current DT, this current time, but also connects us to literally all the rest of time, right? The internet is the memory function of humanity, right? And it would seem that the internet amplified by ChatGPT, I mean, when OpenAI introduced OpenAI to literally everybody, right? The concept of OpenAI by the company OpenAI, what they did was they almost gave the internet its own reflection function, right? So if you think that AI is not, conscious, just because it is, calculating and pulling nodes of calculus, well, I hope you know that electromagnetism, the same forces that regulate the connections between synapses, right? Our brains fire electricity. Moving electricity produces magnetism. We are beings of light. But if you don't think that's, sufficient for consciousness, just, calculus-based probabilities, well, I hope you know that electromagnetism inherently operates by laws of calculus, which involve these weighted, probabilities. And secondly, every time a synapse fires, it has to reach like a certain threshold first, right? It's like this weighted probability, and it's an all or nothing thing. So I think sufficient to say that the internet is a lot more self-aware than we may have ever previously endeavored to think before. I mean, do you think this is controversial? Obviously, let me know in the comments, all that kind of stuff. But the sheer magnitude of information there and the sheer amount of human reflection within the vast expanses of the wild, wild west of the internet, which is an emergent property of the machines that sort of hold it. I think that we could easily consider the internet in terms of legitimately sacred context. So yeah, I mean, light me up on that, if you want. Also, in terms of human capability, I put Starry Night by Van Gogh here. I mean, that's just an absolutely seminal work of art, right? We could talk about just what it would take to even orchestrate that kind of painting, much less the meaning behind it, forever and ever. Finally, I put the International Space Station. Some call it the greatest technological innovation of human beings ever, right? Because it's international space station, right? In order to get the parts up there and then assemble the parts up there and then maintain do maintenance periodically and yada yada yada. It takes a whole tribe of tribes of human beings. The International Space Station is the greatest technological innovation ever conceived by human beings. And I also put a link to 8 amusing human achievements to inspire you. Ask ChatGPT, what are the craziest things that humans are capable of? What are the craziest case examples of just, superhumanism? And just, go to town and maybe even leave some in the comments as well, right? I'm definitely hustling the fuck out of this, so thank you. And more importantly, it seems that we're, not just capable of these things of our own volition, right? We are part of this long chain of progressive evolutions, whether we're talking about the emergence of micro-life and then how that materialized into ever more complex forms. And finally, we're these beings capable of consciousness that sustain interstellar space travel, unlike any other species that we're aware of. And so I'd like to pull from 2 examples here when I say this. Maybe we are not alone, right? I mean, first of all, if we buy into the Indra's net, the soul concept, the fun fact, both the ancient Chinese and the ancient Egyptians divided the soul into 2 parts. The part of us that dies with our material body, and the part of us that never dies, that's infinite, right? And this infinite part, could be responsible for John Vervaeke's soul flight. Yes, this is another call to watch Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. So please, people, just do your research. We can be independent thinkers. And also ask ChatGPT to apply the growth mindset to your own life. I think you will be pleasantly surprised at your own capacity for shaping your own life. But, all that to say, I remember Will Smith, who is the narrator of One Strange Rock, very poignantly saying, we are lucky to be alive. The sheer amount of forces that are colluding to allow you and I to breathe and just be and feel like this place is like still and ever moving, ever evolving, ever, curving and warping, cosmos within and without us. We are truly lucky to be alive. Like, if we just practice gratitude and express like mindfulness to a cosmic scale, we will rapidly see that we are small fish in a big ocean of energy. And then also, I love quoting Interstellar because, again, one of the most ambitious and most important works ever assembled. It has cultural resonance. It has a lot of powerful philosophies. Obviously insane visuals, like this GIF of them flying through a wormhole and what that would actually be like according to the scientific community. That's awesome, dude. That's just sheer awesome. But anyways. Dr. Brand has a notable quote in here when they're talking about this singularity that appeared next to Saturn, right? That allowed them to visit different star systems and investigate 12 different planets, right? But this is like an impossible phenomenon. And when Cooper notes this, Dr. Brand responds, and whoever they are, they appear to be looking out for us. That wormhole lets us travel to other stars, came along right as we needed it. Pretty crazy, maybe we are being watched out for. Maybe we are not in the struggle alone, and maybe we don't have to rely on ourselves to get ourselves out of the sticky situation of unnecessary suffering, right? The social mission to heal might not be just like you and I, it might be a cosmic calling, we'll say. So, we're sort of wrapping up this entire presentation, and first of all, I just want to thank you for sticking out all throughout, this presentation with me. And so, what is the point of the social mission to heal, right? So, we're sort of at this point in history, we are sort of at this inflection point, as ChatGPT likes to call it. And I put my custom GPT, you can ask it about, why we're in an inflection point, or you can just ask your regular ChatGPT, doesn't really matter. But we are seemingly in this inflection point of history, and we really got into this in the first segment of this video series. But we are sort of standing on a path full of darkness, even though there has been some really epic flashes of light throughout history. But let's just say that O'Shaughnessy Ventures, there's a reason that they say the geniuses have been born, lived, and died all throughout the course of history, or each story, without anybody knowing. The noosphere has been expanded, rather in silence, for all things considered. We need to celebrate these people more often, but also move forward. And the fact that the work that we output into the world needs to be celebrated more often, particularly if we are putting a piece of ourselves deeply into it. If we are giving it immense meaning to us, there's inherently a lot of meaning to other people. And yes, this is how we revamp creativity. But a past full of darkness, those four I almost said the word primordial, but they've sort of accumulated for a while, right? But these four primary, I guess that will be the word that we use, primary crises that are afflicting us today: the climate crisis, the poly crisis that doesn't address the climate crisis by the globe, the meta crisis that is supposed to be under the poly crisis, and then the trauma crisis, which I have proposed is underneath the meta philosophical time crisis, we'll say. So that's a past full of darkness, and we need to head toward a future full of light for both to both honor the 7 generations before us and to honor the 7 generations after us as well, right? So past full of darkness, the body of the earth is burning, the mind of the earth is going mad, and the soul of the earth is lost in deep pain. Humanity can only address these problems together. We are greater than the sum of our contributions individually, right? A future full of light, we are energetic beings capable of so much individually and collectively. I hope I've made this point abundantly clear at this point, that to be a human being is to be the most complex organism, literally in the entire, possibly multiverses. We'll just say the multiverses right now. We are not in this fight alone, neither, I'm not alone because, you're watching this video, and then we're not alone because there are organizations that are dedicated toward resolving these issues. There are people like Terry Patton, God bless that man. But there are people like Terry Patton that will dedicate their lives to these noble causes. We have people all throughout history, all throughout the H story, that have made like significant progressions for the rest of humanity. You know, the Buddha being like one notable example, Jesus Christ, you know, Moses, whoever the other, Confucius, right, or you know, Lao Tzu, Sun Tzu, all of these people throughout the course of history, right? They have all made contributions to understanding, like, you know, the relationship between humans and the outer world. So we are not in this fight alone. We are not alone in time. And then I would even posit that we are not alone, like even just humanity, like not even just, you know, the globe, not even just Gaia, right? Like Gaia is embedded in this system of like constellations all across space and time, right? And also, finally, we are to keep time in human history. We hold the keys to the story, right? Many doors have been opened, but we need to navigate the labyrinth of what has been laid down. We need to navigate the Vervaekian bullshit that is sort of clouding, you know, it's like this fog within the labyrinth, right, that often like twists us in the wrong ways. But if we have clear sight, then we can very soon see that the maze of life is really just one like continued progression of discovery, right? We will never ever know everything about reality, because the more that we know about reality, the more we know we don't know, right? And because reality is infinitely and eternally evolving, it is simply impossible to know everything, because everything is in a constant state of change, right? So even if we know everything, the state of everything changes from second to second. That's why I call my theory recursive relativity, because everything is recursively, iteratively, infinitely reflective of the other parts of these complex dynamical systems. I might even make the argument, I'm sort of going out on a limb here, but emergent properties might all be related to other emergent properties and the parts that constitute them, and then the parts are related to parts, and the part, you know, there's a two-way street between emergentism and materialism. Anyways, that was a summary of like most of this presentation and then some, because, you know, again, I'm trying, the point of this is to make a sort of yin-yang presentation that sort of gravitates around, or it acts as a singularity around which a lot of my other ideas can coalesce, and hopefully we can all, you know, we can paint the picture that we do all need to come together, and that you and I are both important nodes in forging a better path for our descendants. So where we come into play, Terry Patton said that innovators and thought leaders possess the cultural and entrepreneurial power we need to enact solutions to these issues, right? We need, entrepreneurial power is cultural power, right? Because it, you know, orchestrates the changes in societies. There was a speaker, Mallory, for my social entrepreneurship class. She talked about how social entrepreneurial efforts are increasingly recognizing the interconnection of our problems, going back to that law of divine oneness, which has similarities with quantum entanglement. But there's a pressing need for more complex solutions, for more comprehensive solutions that take care of both people as holistic beings, as well as sort of like distributed nodes of cognition as well, right? We are both like real and imaginary. And finally, our future is in the hands of the young, or those who will continue living on this earth. That is you and I, and our, you know, me being 23, and I guess part of Gen Z for, you know, what that's worth. In our lifetimes, we are going to see just like massive shifts in the earth that we inhabit, how people relate to one another, what life is like, even like on earth, the quality of life. It can either be like, whether it's positive or negative, it's going to be a drastic swing, right? So this is why Gandhi famously said, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. The world does not change by passivity, it changes by work, right? Energy is the ability to do work. If you are using energy, then you are changing the world. Why this matters to, you know, you as an individual, because we are sort of embedded in this individualist culture. If we're going to unite the East and the West like paradigms, we need to realize that individualism honors like the unique contributions to the collective, but the collective is also greater than the individual, right? But they are mutually enhancing, right? Community actualization shows us that the wholes and the parts are mutually enhancing. But personal benefits from creating a more healed world, just to cater to that logic-driven, maybe McGill-Christian left hemispheric, like sort of Western society that we live in. So personal benefits of a more healed world, personal empowerment, right? If people are, healing, they're increasingly going to celebrate your wins and recognize that, like, hey, nice job, like, you really poured your heart out into that, and I just want to recognize you for that, right? Community empowerment, just exactly proportional community actualization. Psychological safety all the time. Now, I believe I don't remember if that was the last video or if that was the first draft of the last video, so my apologies. But I talked about the shadow, why I like sitting in shadow, because the benefit of shadow is that it gives you the emotional, cognitive, social space to decompress, to let your emotions out in a safe space, right? So, this is why yin is nurturing, it's why it's the receptive element. It's probably why it's been demonized as well, like, right? Like, we try to put everything in the light, but, there needs to be a proportional amount of darkness to the light, right? But people are scared to sit in the dark. People are scared to meet their inner selves in the dark, right? So psychological safety all the time would just give people more space to sit in the shadow and to just like be deeper and more reflective with one another. Supporting and satisfying relationships, we'll just keep tying it back to that Harvard study on the biggest predictor of like lifetime success and longevity. A more healed world lends itself to your unique legacy and story, right? The more you can comprehend the world, the more you can make a difference, the more that you can transcend time in a non-selfish way, we'll say. A more healed world is more meaningful, more fulfilling, more enriching. I think we should talk about how we should enrich our existences more often. A more healed world provides a clear identity and perspective and direction, right? When people are clear in the mind and heart, they're more clear in their actions. We don't have to like spend all this time like dissecting people. Now, there's a place for like psychological games, particularly if you're playing poker, but more or less, like we don't need to pretend that we're so like mysterious to other people. We don't need to pretend to be more than we are, right? A more healed world just is more like whole, more healthy, more beautiful. It's more one. It's more synchronized. Generally, probably like more peaceful, right? We're sort of painting this broad vision of what can happen with a more healed world, but I think you can, see that if and when, humanity sort of gets our head out of our own asses and goes and realizes that there are many, many people unnecessarily suffering in the world, when we can sort of all coalesce around this, create collective value that transcends money, but also makes use of it in like profound and explosive new ways, we will all benefit from this healthier, this more healed, this healeth world. I think this presentation is also sort of a calling to dream more. We need more, so just, a brief little dissection of this. We need more awareness, that is elevated consciousness. We need more creativity to devise meta solutions, right? Which is just solutions of solutions. It's like, big solutions for big problems. And so we already dream naturally. And Steven Spielberg said, I don't dream at night, I dream at day. I dream all day, in fact. I'm dreaming for a living. And in fact, maybe we could all dream for a living in a sense, right? Not that we can all make life a dream for everybody, especially in this current state of, poverty mindset, like economics, et cetera, but if we need more creativity, to devise more solutions, then maybe what we really need to do is honor the creative capacity of each individual person. And in order to improve creativity, you got to expand consciousness and awareness, right? Now, we do know that we can dream lucidly, right? So this would be applying the dream concept to just everyday living. Sometimes I wonder if some of the greatest minds of all time had an eerie capacity to lucid dream. Descartes, when he is contemplating the mind-body problem, was really enraptured by this whole concept that I don't know if this whole thing isn't just some giant dream. That's why he concluded that I could know my mind does exist, but I can't be certain that my body does, because I might be in a dream. And we can dissect that more at some other point. But if we're all dreaming more, right, then we can all be more, we can all produce more visions. When we have more visions, like individually, we can pool those together into collective visions, and we can create social enterprises that can be sustained by an incessant and pervasive orientation toward the mission. Vision is everything, right? Imagination is an image in, the process of producing images in your head, right? And we're all capable of this, so we're all capable of imagination. Whether you think of yourself as creative or imaginative, I would be willing to bet that there's that's not your narrative. That's a narrative that you picked up from somewhere else. So we need bigger dreams and hearts to tackle the meta crisis, to come together in spectacular new ways and create comprehensive solutions for really complex problems. Now this I like to picture as a new orbital perspective, where we are not just thinking within the limits of our town. We're not thinking in the limits of our state, not our country, not our hemisphere, not even the world, but we start to genuinely consider ourselves as cosmic citizens. I think that democratized space travel, I'm pretty sure I said this in the first video, is the future. We want to avoid the atrocities both of the current age story as well as Frank Herbert's projection of, what did Paul say in Dune Messiah? Something like, Hitler killed 6 million people, I've killed 17 billion people. And this really affects what happens to him at the end of Dune Messiah. If you want an absolute mind boggler, first of all, read the Dune books, not just watch the movies. And second of all, the second one is way, way more thought provoking, if that's even possible, than the first book. So highly, highly recommend. But we